We all have issues. The most traumatic of these issues are rarely discussed. Sexual abuse, especially when involving a child, is a subject hidden in many Georgia homes. Tonight, we will take a step behind closed doors to hear the stories of the survivors and the people who pick up the broken pieces of their lives.
He was an alcoholic, and he started when I was 7 years old. He started, messing with me, showing his private parts, touching me, and I didn't know what in the world was going on, but I knew it wasn't right. I was so frightened.
The first night he came into my room, and it started with touching first. And at 7 or 8, you're not really understanding what's going on. Is it a touch to wake me up? Is something wrong? So I was a little confused, but knew it wasn't right.
My mom would leave, and I could see her from my bedroom, like the car go by, and I would think, because he would call me in his room. Well, eventually I would get to that point, but he would call me in his room, like he would just ask me to take my clothes off. So I think he wanted to see if I had hit puberty yet, and that's how it started.
We will meet 3 women living right here in Georgia affected by child sexual abuse. We will explore the lifelong impacts of their experiences. We will also speak to the Georgia Center for Child Advocacy along with DFAC's director Tom Rawlings, 2 entities created around helping the children in Georgia that need the help the most.
One in 10 children is sexually abused before the age of 18, and 90% of the time it's by somebody that they know, and oftentimes people that they love and trust and that the family loves and trusts.
Jackie's mother was left in this unfortunate position, leaving Jackie with a trusted family friend.
With my brother being a drug addict and by me being a kid, my parents knew he was a drug addict, but they had never dealt with it. I guess they thought he was still functional, and I had to go down in the basement and wash, and he would go down there and have his way with me. And I didn't know. I knew it was wrong, but all I felt was scared. It could happen under your nose. It happened to me under my parents' nose. And with sexual abuse, I'm given my own numbers. I haven't researched it, but I would say 80%, probably 90, is immediate people that have access because they know the child. They know what they can do when they can do it. It has to be someone that knows your child. But after I got abused, I think I started saying, oh, good. I felt like, well, I'm glad it ain't a whole lot of family, because how many people would have abused me?
Facilities such as the Georgia Center for Child Advocacy are put in place to help both parents and children in the after effects of the abuse. They educate and guide parents into understanding what their child endured outside of their own thoughts and feelings.
First, we do a lot of listening to the parent to try to kind of gauge where they are. Is it that they don't believe, like they really don't believe, or is it just that they're responding in shock? And if they're responding in shock, helping them with understanding what their child is saying and that this does happen. That's the other thing that sometimes happens is parents think, oh my gosh, I'm the only one that this has ever happened to. My child, this couldn't possibly be happening. This never happens in families like ours. So we help caregivers understand that this does happen, and that I want to say the statistics are that it's over 90% of children who are sexually abused by someone that they know. So we try to listen. We try to provide a lot of support. We also try to provide information that helps them to see that their child is really talking about things that quite likely happened. We're not truth tellers in that we don't always know when someone is telling the truth or telling a lie, but our job is to be there for the children, to be able to talk as much as they can about what's happening, and be there for the caregivers to help support. If the caregiver stays in that area of denial, then we partner very closely with DFACS to begin to ask the questions about, is this child safe in their home? If a parent, let's say it's a mom, and mom doesn't believe that her boyfriend could possibly do this, the boyfriend might get locked up on charges of child molestation, but they might get out before a trial that's way down the road. Could we say with certainty that that parent is going to protect their child from boyfriend? If they don't believe, they may not protect. They may not keep that person away from their child. So that's when the systems would begin to intervene and look at, is there a grandmother? Is there an aunt? Is there someone who can help that child and keep that child safe while mom or whoever the caregiver is figures out their stuff, figures out what they need to do.
Sometimes a parent may experience feelings of guilt or shock when learning that the person that is sexually molesting their child is actually someone that they love and trust. These feelings cause them to be oblivious to the warning signs that are right in front of their eyes.
Fortunately for Jamie, this was not the case. Her mother decided to take a different approach once hearing about the sexual abuse that her daughter had been enduring.
He would take me to Chuck Norris movies. And today when I was kind of thinking about talking to you about this, I was thinking that was probably a manipulation tactic to show me, I guess, violence, because I was in 3rd grade. So I don't think I was ever exposed to that. I was very afraid. And, we had a van that, it was like 2 separate. It was like the older versions. So he would have me stand next to him in the car or in the van and touch me while we were driving, and like out in the middle of the day to take me to these violent movies. Like it was strange, but now looking back on it, which I don't think about it often, but when I look back on it, I feel like there was a reason for that, to go to those, and why he liked that, I guess. But for me, I don't know that I necessarily really understood what was going on. I think, and maybe he was doing something to manipulate my mom in a way where she started to have a nervous breakdown, but not even knowing what he was doing to me. But she ended up, this is gonna sound crazy, and she ended up trying to kill herself. And so she went into a mental hospital. She slit her wrist in the bathroom, but it had nothing to do with what he was doing to me. She had no idea, because I was afraid of him. So I didn't tell her. And again, when you're young like that, you just don't grasp what is going on. He had me all alone for a while. And eventually it progressed enough where he would have me do things to him, and I don't know what you want me to tell you, but we never had intercourse. But it got to a point where when she came home, he told me eventually he was going to put it in me. And I told my mom. And she got me out of there. And she did an amazing job. Like, looking back, she never blamed me. She never, I was just so young. Like, I just didn't understand.
Sometimes the abuser may not be an adult, but in fact another child, commonly an older child. It is important for parents to be brought to an awareness about this form of abuse as well, so that way they can be proactive in preventing it from happening.
Maybe there's a situation with older youth and younger youth in situations together, and trying to make sure that there is adult supervision in those situations, especially in places where kids are changing, like a locker room for sports and athletics. It's important that there's a lot of adult supervision, and that we're not putting older youth in charge of younger youth without that extra layer of protection. And also just paying attention to the things that children say, and maybe the interactions that youth are having together, and if any of it seems inappropriate, those would be situations where you would want to intervene and not just say, oh, kids are being kids and brush it off, but really paying attention to those situations, because about 40% of the time children are abused by an older youth. So it's really important, not just with adults, but that we're also monitoring those situations where older youth are with younger youth as well.
Child sexual predators do not have options in terms of where the sexual acts are performed. Often, they will act in the moment, catching the children and parents in vulnerable situations. They may watch the child and those around them to plan the ideal time to strike or act off of impulse when the opportunity presents itself.
Where they're setting up a situation to abuse children, we call that grooming. And the grooming process can happen over time. Oftentimes it happens, could even be a year to 2 years, where an abuser is setting up the situation so that they can take advantage of children. And those could be things like, offering to spend extra time with a specific child when maybe that doesn't seem like the right person to be doing that. It could be something like giving gifts to a child, paying special attention to children. Oftentimes they go after children that seem more vulnerable. They say things like, they can smell the blood in the water. So it's like a shark, where they can tell children that are more vulnerable, children that maybe have only one parent at home and are seeking attention from other adults. And so they specifically oftentimes pick children and set up the situation where they can have that isolated interaction.
It is often difficult for the non-abusive parental figure in the situation to fully accept that the abuse happened to their child, especially if it was done by someone close to them, such as a spouse, sibling, parent, or friend.
So it sort of depends on the situation as to how parents respond. I would say for the most part, parents are absolutely surprised. And if you think about like the grief process, those are the reactions we see of parents, parents who are grieving what has happened to their child. If in those situations where maybe it was a step-parent or a boyfriend or girlfriend of the child's caregiver, primary caregiver, they express shock, anger, disbelief, sadness. They can be, sometimes appear to be numb in the way that they are responding. I don't think there's many people in this world who date someone and marry someone who they know would be capable of hurting children. And so when an allegation like that comes forward, the initial response is, well, that couldn't be true. There must be a mistake. And there has to be more information given to the caregiver in order to help them see that maybe indeed it is something that is true, that their child is saying.
Other children grow older and find husbands and have families. The subconscious thoughts that come up from their experience still, however, continue to play a major role in day-to-day life.
I'm the oldest. My siblings will always usually be with my mother. I was usually old enough to be home by myself. I was a latchkey child, so I would come home by myself. So 9 out of 10 times, my mother would be either at church or at a friend's house. So he kind of knew when I was home or when my mom had to be at work or at church. So that it was like in between those times. The first time that I did let my mother know was roughly around the age of 12. I actually told my aunt first, and my aunt went to my mother, and of course my mother didn't want to believe it. I was lying, I was wrong, I'm trying to take her man. I was everything in the book. She approached me on it, and we had I want to say a discussion, an argument about it, and she told me that in our culture that's unheard of. Being West Indian, that's not something that they do, and we don't talk about things like that, and I should repeat it, and that was that. It was no other discussion after that. It was, I'm lying and let's move forward. Even into my adult life, I kept a diary. She eventually found my diary, and from there it was still, I was shunned upon. The only person that believed me and tried to help me was my aunt. My aunt tried to get custody of us. Well, custody of me. I started spending more time with my aunt. I stayed with her in Brooklyn. I ended up transferring to school at one point to go out there. She told my mother that she needed help, so I can come out there and help her in the home and stuff. So she was my saving grace per se. But again, there was no real evidence. Nobody looked or investigated what was going on at the time, and I ended up moving out on my own at the age of 16.
You can never be too careful with who you entrust around your children. A potential abuser does not necessarily have a face. It can be someone that you least suspect. Sometimes people overlook how important it is for a parent to be involved when their child goes through an episode of abuse.
Well, you see stories where parents, because you don't, I don't know, maybe I make excuses for people, but when you see parents or mothers that blame their child or think that the kid is doing something wrong because of how hard that is for everybody, and you just don't want to believe somebody would do something like that. I think when that person just unconditionally jumps in, I think that makes all the difference. You feel secure and you feel loved, and then you can handle things in a different way than if everybody was attacking you and you become more of a victim. I think your parent or guardian stepping in and taking care of you in a positive way gives you that strength to move on and not just think about it all the time.
Parental support is critical during times of trauma in a child's life. A lack of support and doubt within a parent can have many lasting effects on the child and their future family.
At the age of 16, when I finally moved out, that's when I found out I was pregnant. I gave birth to him, and my son ended up actually passing away at the age of 5 for a heart condition. And it was very difficult because my family shunned me. I actually ended up making up a story that it was someone else to cover my family's saving grace. My mother was basically disowned me at that time. So I was literally on my own with a child, trying to finish high school, have a job, take care of medicals, and live a life. And it was very, very difficult. I was alone.
Some of these unfortunate children grow up into single parenthood situations, subconsciously still dealing with the after effects of the abuse. Jackie was one of these children.
I was 14. I lied over at McDonald's, and I told them I was 16. I looked 16. I acted 18. They hired me. And I was in 9th grade, and I was working full-time at McDonald's. By the end of 10th grade, and I was able to buy my clothes, thought I was cute. I was sharp. But one thing I noticed, I met a young man that was older than I was just looking for company. I was looking for attention. I wasn't looking for sex. Back to my brother. After my uncle only bothered me that summer. But when I got home, it's like my brother took over where my uncle left off. And my brother, I went through sexual abuse with him from age, I'll say 7 to 11. I was 7 years old, started with my uncle, age 7, my brother, 7 to 11. So I was broken. But what I kept doing is stuffing those feelings. I would stay busy, and whenever those feelings would come up, the being scared, I was scared a lot, but I didn't show it. I put on a smiling face everywhere I went, but deep down inside, I was scared. I didn't tell anybody. Right after 10th grade, I got pregnant. All I was looking for was someone to love me. And I got with somebody, and he was a regular young man. I had 4 kids. And I did divorce my first husband because I realized, oh my God, he has some alcohol and drug issues. I don't want that kind of life. I'm not about all of that. And I not only thought about myself, I thought about my children. If I stay in this marriage, it's going to be worse on my kids. So I took my kids and I left them. I turned around years later. I didn't get married right away. I didn't remarry right away. I remarried. I remarried almost the same person. He was an alcohol and drug abuser. Was fine, but fine don't mean nothing if he doesn't have it together. And so I was up here and he was down here. So I didn't stick around long. 3 years after, I divorced.
In the beginning of my marriage, I didn't want any more children. My husband wanted children, so that was a battling conversation between us. And at first, he couldn't understand why. And when I finally sat down and explained everything to him, he had a better understanding. My husband's fully aware of my history, so he helps me, through it. And the best way when I do have my moments is we talk through it. But I don't let it try to consume me. I just know it made me a better person. And now to make sure that my children have a better life and no one else around me or a child ever goes through that, because I know what to look for and what to say and what to do. And there's resources out here now that we can talk to people and get help.
Both of the men that I was married to are great dads, and I feel comfortable and I trust them. But you watch for things differently. You pay closer attention because I think people think it's not going to happen, and it does happen, and it can easily happen.
The Georgia Center for Child Advocacy plays a major role in the healing of children that walk through their door.
When you see the kids come in and you know the stories behind the reasons that they're here, but then when you think about the work that we're doing here to help heal those kids, it really just inspires me to make sure that my staff have the right resources at their disposal to do the great work that they do every day. Every once in a while, we'll hear a kid giggling and skipping down the hall here, and that's when I know that we've done a great job because we've helped to heal that child and they're able to laugh and to feel really good and safe in this space.
The center holds a clinical program in which they fine-tune the treatment given based on the specific situation and circumstance to the child.
When they come to us, we do an intake assessment where we're really trying to get a sense for what their needs are. And from that point, after we assess what the needs are, we provide whatever treatment would be most fitting to what's going on in their life. There are different approaches for children with trauma, and we make an effort to use evidence-based approaches. So these are approaches that have a lot of research support behind them. By far the one we use the most is called trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy. And this is a treatment that is really the gold standard for children who've been through anything traumatic, but especially sexual abuse. It's a brief approach, generally takes about 4 to 6 months to complete. And children really go through the steps of learning ways to cope with what's happened to them, of processing the abuse that's happened, and gaining the ability to reduce the risk of future victimization. And the second approach is alternatives for families, cognitive behavioral therapy, and this is a treatment for children and families who are at risk of physical violence and physical abuse. And that is also an evidence-based approach, and children come here to gain support around that. And so our final approach is PSB CBT. I know there's a lot of acronyms, so but this for children with problematic sexual behaviors. And these are children that have engaged in inappropriate sexual acting out behaviors. And it's offered in a group setting. And so, but it's also an evidence-based approach. And so those are the 3 approaches that we offer in terms of therapy.
Unfortunately, children who suffer child sexual abuse sometimes feel that it's their fault. And it's our responsibility as professionals to make sure that they understand that they're the victim of a crime and that they can, in fact, move beyond this and be whole and healthy. Child sexual abuse is one of those horrendous things that occurs that really can damage a person for life, but also it's something from which children can recover if we make sure that they are treated well, if they are treated with kindness and empathy, if we get them good therapy, and we help them to show that what occurred to them was not their fault, they did nothing wrong, they were a victim, but they can in fact triumph over the abuse that they have suffered. And they can go on to live very productive and useful lives, just like anyone who has ever experienced a crime. We get about 140,000 calls a year of allegations of either neglect or abuse. And of course, there are different types of abuse. There's neglect, there's emotional abuse, there's physical abuse, and of course, one of the worst is sexual abuse. Of the 22,000 that we find have actually suffered abuse, about 4% of those have actually been sexually abused. However, it's also safe to say that there are probably children who have been abused that we never know about. Historically and internationally, and even in the United States, the number of children that are sexually abused is actually underreported, we believe.
If you have been a victim of sexual abuse, it is crucial that you get the help and healing that you need. Don't keep it bottled up inside, thinking that no one will understand. Speak up. You are not alone.
Have a voice. There has to be someone that you trust, somebody that you know that you can talk to talk to. That's something that you should not hold in. That is something that you should not fear of letting somebody know. Somebody needs to know, because the person who's doing it needs to be held accountable, and you need to be helped. You should not go through your childhood holding that in and having to contain that at that age. You are a child, it's not your fault, and someone is out there to help you. There's so many resources in this day and age that someone can get you the help that you need. Do not hold it in.
I'm hoping whoever's here hears this tape that they don't have to go through it. And if they do, catch it right when it starts. And we have to stop suffering in silence. That's what it is. And that's a lie from the devil. You have to talk to your kids. Talk to your friends. Talk to your family. We don't have to suffer in silence no more.
Sexual abuse is a subject hidden behind closed doors that need to be opened. Keep the communication going. Take the steps today to protect your children tomorrow.